Hello everyone, welcome to another video. This time I'll be making something new for this channel, my own Iceberg video. I found this iceberg made by the community online for Barotrauma and thought, why not explore all the bits and pieces of this wonderful crack addiction of a game. Also, if you want my opinion about Barotrauma, I already did a review for it a while ago, so if you're interested, I'll link in the description below. Anyways, get comfy because this is going to take a while. And let us begin with level 1. Multiplayer. This is self-explanatory, although the game can be played and you can actually finish the game with a crew full of bots. The best times you'll ever have with this game is with a crew full of human players. If I remember correctly, bots can't get traitor missions, for instance, so if you check the traitors on your server, the option, the only way for you to experience what it's like to have someone sabotaging your ship and knocking out your crew is by loading it in with live players. Same goes for cave diving, where human players will be more responsive and generally you'll have less micromanagement overall, which can be a pain with an all AI crew. Do note that you can actually save your campaign in multiplayer every time you dock, so you don't need to go through the entire campaign in one session from start to finish. The game takes place on Europa. As it says in the beginning, the game takes place on Jupiter's moon of Europa, a planet we know today holds basically more water than Earth, but we don't know underneath the surface what it's like. And so basically Barotrauma tries to fill the gap and answer an uneasy question we'll probably have to face one day, and that is, what if there is life down there and we're just not ready to see it because everything down there is built to kill us? The thing about Europa is that there's an option in-game to simulate encroaching radiation, simulating the insane amounts of radiation Europa is absorbing from Jupiter in real life. This starts at the base level and basically forces the player to go down to ever deeper parts of the moon to escape the radiation, only compounding the problems humanity faces on Europa and the reason why humans can't just live on Europa's surface and away from any monsters. Mods. There are a ton of mods to the game, which is part of the reason why it's so addictive. Just like Fallout, you load a new mod set each playthrough and get an entirely different experience. There are mods that make the map bigger, add new and terrifying foes, new types of crew members like robots, give you the ability to actually clone an assistant, grow or buy resources from a vending machine, have a black market vending machine in your submarine that you can buy resources for crafting at all times, adding new stations, weapons, submarines and encounters. Everything about the game is moddable, and modding is the basis on which the game is built, and this is absolutely intentional. There's even a submarine and a character editor in-game where you can design your own NPCs and submarines. And if you're interested more about how to build your own sub, I made a video about how to wire your submarine, which is basically the hardest part, and yet it's super easy once you understand the basics. One thing mods detract from Barotrauma, at least from my opinion, is that there are more modded servers than vanilla ones, and most of these have long lists of mods, so by the time you download all of them, the game might kick you out. So you'll eventually opt for the vanilla servers more often than modded ones. But they are cool enough though, because there's a mod that turns all the characters into waifu anime girls for all the thirsty boys out there, as well as a total conversion mod that of course takes this game into the realm of Warhammer 40k. Factions. In the vanilla, there are four main factions that you can align yourself with. The coalition is a sort of a main government of Europa, built out of cooperation between Europa's biggest settlements to try and bring order to the European society and manage its resources. We're jumping a little bit ahead of ourselves, but their main goal is to try and preserve human civilization and keep it safe, now with the uncertainty regarding Earth and the lingering thought that for all we know, the humans on Europa could be the last remnants on mankind. Not all governments are perfect, and the coalition is known to prefer heavy-handed approach when dealing with dissent, cutting stations off the supply loop to let them die, basically, or sending heavily armed assault forces to squash all resistance, which basically spawned the next faction on our list, the Jovian Separatists. These are hardcore groups of rebels, agitators, and terrorists. Originally, the Separatists were formed just about the same time as the Coalition did, and are the main antagonists and stand in contrast to the Coalition, seeking to build a non-violent democracy instead of the heavy-handed rule of fear used by the Coalition. At the first, they were a non-violent group until a certain incident occurred that we'll discuss later down this iceberg that forced them into becoming way more radical, like terrorist bombing coalition stations, political assassinations, and the like. They're not as powerful militarily as the coalition, but have in the form of military power, they have enough in the form of military power that if you piss them off, they will send subs after you to hunt you down on your voyages. Third faction that we have on the list is the Church of the Husk. The Husk is a parasite that exists in the biosphere of Europa. It is basically a zombie parasite that turns people into horrifying monsters, able to swim faster than normal humans could and survive at any depth. These attributes that the Church of the Husk wishes to explore through study and prayer. They see the Husk as the next stage of human evolution, seeking to find a way to give the human body the ability to seemingly breathe underwater, resist to any pressure at any depth, and swim twice as fast, but without the whole turning to a zombie thing. Although their goal is noble, their track history is far from perfect, with reports of people being forced to turn into husks as part of their communions and ritual sacrifices, with lots of drug use and possibly cannibalism. Today, it seems like their past has mostly stayed in the past, but who knows what happens in the inner rings and the inner chambers of their temples. Last faction that we have on the list is the Children of the Hunk Mother. So there is a rumor floating around that there was a program made by the Coalition to bring entertainers to submarines to try and keep the morale of its crews high. And other theories suggest that these are completely deranged individuals who just lost it. They are a mysterious bunch. They don't like to answer directly, and they like to talk in riddles. They wear funny looking uniforms, have squeaking shoes, and like to use the clown horn. Although they are generally despised by the greater European society, they usually hold no real menace or grudge against anyone. They claim they are here to merely entertain and follow their deity, which they called the Hunk Mother. But most people are still suspicious of things they don't understand, and unless the clown starts explaining things, that's probably how things will stay. F3 commands. In the game, pressing F3 brings the dev console. In it, you can use cheat codes to get items, spawn NPCs, and do all sorts of shenanigans. Personally, I only ever used cheat codes once or twice, being stuck without a trader or fabricator and running out of coil gun ammo for the guns of the submarine. and I tried to power through it, but without them running silent, without active sonar, and still it did not work. Of course, this has happened only on single player campaigns, so I have no bad feelings about cheating in a single player game. Two competing cults. This relates to the Church of the Husk and the Children of the Hunk Mother, and they are both considered less main faction-like and more like cults nobody really understands unless they are part of said cult, and even then, cult members rarely speak of the cult's innermost secrets. For that reason, they are branded as such. However, I don't really think they're in competition with one another, as the main political conflict, if you can call it such, is between the separatists and the coalition. The church and the clowns are just like somewhere in the middle, so I don't really think they're actually in competition with one another, as they are mostly live side by side as far as I know, and I never saw them actually fighting each other. So there's that. Okay, so we finished with level 2, and it's time to continue descending into the deep waters of level 3. Dark Water. Dark Water is a multiplayer game that went on early access on Steam on 22nd of April 2025. It draws direct inspiration from Barotrauma and blending its gameplay with concepts of other games such as Iron Lung and Little Company. You play as a crew tasked with investigating underwater points of interest. In it, you'll battle sea pirates and hostile submarines, as well as nightmarish creatures from the deep sea in a quest to get more money and fuel, and all of this in 3 dimensions compared to the 2-dimension graphics of Barotrauma, adding a new layer of horror and immersion. I'll be honest, I saw like 20 minutes video of gameplay of this game, and it's genuinely frightening. Although I am known to be a coward, and also this game seems to be quite a long way away from being completed, but you should definitely check it out. Space Station 13 inspired. Barotrauma is heavily inspired by another game called Space Station 13. Even the lead developer of Barotrauma, Jonas Rikkonen, said that the main source of inspiration for creating Barotrauma is Space Station 13. Space Station 13 is a top-down, tile-based RPG multiplayer game where players are tasked with keeping the station functional, and was originally released in 2003. Much like Barotrauma, each player has a specific role to play each round. Each role has their own responsibilities, access to equipment, and abilities that allow them to perform their duties. And this is where the game takes a turn towards Among Us than anything else, as players can perform their duties or choose to do anything else with their abilities to cause chaos around the station. Also, unbeknownst to the rest of the crew, some players can spawn as antagonists. This can range from merely human saboteurs to xenomorphs, rogue AI androids, and even some Lovecraftian horror entities and more. Also, there are several ways to play and win a round. It all depends on the players on the server. Hidden Deep. Hidden Deep is an atmospheric sci-fi horror game heavily inspired by Half-Life, The Thing, and Aliens. It tasks a group of players with exploring a huge subnautical research and mining outpost. It has both a handcrafted single-player campaign or multiplayer game mode with friends on randomized levels. The story is that somewhere, it is not exactly explained where, a group of scientists found a strange anomaly and then all contact was lost, so you know the drill from here. The reasons I think this game is listed on this iceberg is because the game is very close in terms of gameplay to Barotrauma, the fact that it's 2D, where you're fighting abyssal horrors that try to eat you and make you into a human red paste, and also because the game is published by the same company called Daedalic Entertainment. It has mixed reviews on Steam. Most people say that the price is high for this game, but they also say that if you have friends and buy it during a sale, you might have a few hours of good fun. And as we all know, friends is a very rare commodity in our modern social life. Now, since this level seems to be all about games that either are like Barotrauma or that gave inspiration to Barotrauma or took inspiration from it, I'd like to add one game here, and that is Iron Lung, as it fits so perfectly with the bleak story of Barotrauma. In Iron Lung, you play as a convict shoved into a creaking, leaking, rusty submarine and tasked with photographing points of interest throughout a map. The world of Iron Lung is just about the bleakest, most depressing, grim sci-fi world I've ever heard of. The entire galaxy, or even universe, complete with suns and planets, just blinked out of existence in an event called the Quiet Rapture. And all that remains of humanity are about 700 plus people living on space stations that are divided between two factions. Some moons seem to also survive the rapture, and on a few of them humanity discovered oceans made of actual human blood. And so you're tasked by the Consolidation of Iron, one of the two known factions of the game, to descend into the deepest part of a blood ocean to take pictures. You are completely blind because your submarine is not built to withstand these kinds of pressures, and you have to navigate roughly through XYZ coordinates. You can only see using a camera that is like the Polaroid cameras of old, producing grainy pictures of what's in front of you, and as you soon discover very early on, you're not alone down there. It's not a long game to finish. The dev himself said that once you get your bearings, it'll take you about an hour or so to complete, and yet the story sticks with you because there are so many unknowns. It just keeps you thinking about it long after you finish it. Why the Quiet Rapture happened? Is there anyone else out there, any other humans who survived other than the two known factions? How will humanity survive in a dark universe with no light and no planets bigger than moon size? Where did all the blood in the blood oceans come from? And how come it's not coagulating? And why there are more blood oceans than one? All these questions without answers. Alright, we are continuing to descend through the dark waters. And now let's proceed even deeper. Level 4. Legacy Edition. So basically the Barotrauma Legacy Edition is a reference to the versions of Barotrauma before the Steam release, from somewhere around 2015-2016. Basically, the community says that the game was mostly the same, although there are a lot of differences from the Barotrauma we know today. Like for instance, the subs were a lot more blocky than what they are today. The graphics are a bit more cartoonish, and most if not all monsters underwent a complete overhaul in appearance, like how the crawlers used to look like giant crayfish and mud raptors. Basically the game's main antagonists did not exist in the legacy version. Also back then there was a creature called the Carrier, which was basically like an infested Terran command post from StarCraft, but only that this one was sentient and mobile and could hunt players' subs down. Overall sounds creepy, but I think we can all agree that the current version is best. Husk. We talked about this before, so now we'll go into greater detail. The husk is a parasite that sits on the host's throat. When it evolves, it takes away the ability to speak, meaning that infected players cannot communicate to other players that they are infected. Infection only takes a few minutes to transform a human being into a zombie with tendrils coming out of its mouth, which are actually stingers that it uses to attack and infect more prey. The husk, as stated before, can swim in any pressure and is immune to the effects of diving in the cold European waters, hence why the church wants to study it so much. There are two known species that can be infected and become zombified: humans and crawlers. This raises a question whether there is some sort of biological compatibility between the two, as the husk parasite could not have evolved on its own to infect humans without humans in its area. Also, because most husks are usually found wearing old diving suits, meaning that some of the first human explorers to Europa fell prey to it, so some few hundred years ago. So there has to be some sort of compatibility biologically for the husk to be able to take roots in humans. Lately, new forms of husk have appeared. Some are through mods, which basically add variants of regular creatures only huskified, while the canon game has also added a few new forms of husks on its own, because why not? These are the husk crawler, a human on four legs with two scythes coming out of its back that, unlike the shambling husks, which are fast and can take quite a while to get to you, this one sprints and it has a leaping attack, meaning that it can close distance rapidly and is very dangerous in close quarters combat. Next is the Husk exosuit, which is just a person in an exosuit, only that now it is very hard to kill. An exosuit running after you, trying to infect you. Last is an absolute terrifying monstrosity, an overgrown husk parasite that grew tendrils that can slice open submarines, making it more like a giant shrimp than human. It is insanely fast swimming, even faster on land, has 600 health, and can eviscerate entire crews in rapid order, which is why it's called the Chimera. Spaghetti code. This refers to the game's complex and messy code base. Barotrauma is an indie game, and as such it's made by a small dev team who usually are more interested in making a fun playable experience than creating code architecture that is easy and simple to understand. This can lead to frustration among anyone who tries to mod the game, as its architecture is again difficult to understand, although from the huge modding base that the game has, I'd say it's a no factor for a lot in the community. And this is all I have about this subject, so moving on. Shipwrecks. As you travel down below the surface of Europa, you might encounter shipwrecks of other submarines that passed here long ago and have sunk on their way to their destination. The reason why a submarine would sink varies, and these submarines can hold great amounts of loot, weapons, ammo, and resources. Just don't forget that the things that caused it to sink might either be still nearby, or they might be trapped inside, waiting for you to unleash them back into this world. So, just like in any activity on Europa, caution is advised. Ballast flora. Ballast flora is a type of organism that can infect your ballast pumps. Once a tumor-like growth appears on your submarine, it will expand, releasing acidic chemicals wherever it touches to kill the crew. And once the crew is disposed of, that growth will continue until it encompasses the entire submarine, and then it starts sapping power from the reactor, eventually morphing into becoming a Thalamus. The best and most common way to kill a ballast flora is to kill the growth attached to the ballast pump with fire damage. Plasma torches are the most common tool in use for killing ballast flora, but flamethrowers might also work if you have any and if you're brave enough. Alright, so we have cleared level 4 and we are now continuing to descend into the dark, deep waters of level 5. All legacy monsters are still in the game. Apparently, all the monsters from the legacy version can still be found in the game files. However, they are erased from the monster spawn list and therefore you won't be able to meet them in-game in its current version. There is a mod called Legacy Monsters which only adds said monsters back into the monster spawn list so that you'll be able to encounter them more in the field. Also, I think Barotraumatic or other creature packs also add legacy versions of monsters into the game, as I very often see what the AI calls as legacy crawlers attacking my submarines, especially in the early parts or the early starting areas of a new campaign. Europa is a space slum. I can't really find anything on this, only a single mention on Reddit where this iceberg was originally posted. I'll just speculate and say that what I think it means is that Europa was considered a sort of backwater planet, so nobody really cares what's going on here, which can be used as a reason why Earth stopped sending crafts to Europa, but for me this makes zero sense. Google AI Assistant thinks that people call Europa a space slum because of the harsh living conditions, the radiation, the overall hard life humans have to live through in the game because of the fact that they are not on top of the food chain, just like on Earth. So again, this is just a speculation, but I think that's what this is referring to. The Abyss and bosses of the Abyss. The Abyss is basically an area of the sea that is far beyond usual crush depth. You can gain access to the Abyss through holes between islands in every level, and you will see that there are islands in every level, and in between them you will see openings which will allow you to enter the Abyss. Inside the Abyss, 3 creatures usually reside, and these are the toughest, meanest creatures in the game: the Latcher, the Charybdis, and the Endworm. The Latcher is the stuff of nightmares, one big circular mouth surrounded by hundreds of eyes, if not dozens of eyes. It likes to attack submarines to pry them open and eat all within, and when it can't, it latches to the submarine and drags it way below its crush depth, killing the crew. There's basically no limit how deep he can drag a submarine, and he's a menacing beast who can tunnel through rock to get his prey. Charybdis is a bigger, meaner foe. It is as big, if not bigger, than the biggest submarines employed by the Coalition. It uses brute force to pulverize submarines and pry them open. At first you will see a giant orange ping on your sonar indicating it's close. Then you will hear a scream. The mere scream it produces when it attacks submarines is enough to make even the most seasoned mariners wet their pants. It is the definition of deep sea gigantism, an unfathomably large creature with 7,500 health points can only be reasonably taken down by the most damage-dealing weapons available to humanity. The wiki also states that you should definitely avoid trying to attack it with an SMG or a diving knife, which seems like a really helpful bit of info. The last boss of the abyss, quote unquote, is the Endworm, and not because it's close to the end of the game, but because of its ability to end things very rapidly. Being bigger and having 500 HP more than the Charybdis, this is considered the final boss before the final boss. It will let you know that it's out there when you hear the scream of 1,000 tortured, mangled whales coming straight at you. The sonar signal for this beast is far larger than your own submarine. This beast usually attacks by beelining towards you and attacking with tremendous force and then retreating. It is the one enemy the wiki absolutely says you should throw every nuclear shell you have at it. The priority is to shoot its armor so that you can blow up its inner organs and explode flesh. The wiki also states that you should definitely not try to leave the submarine and should 100% ditch crew members that do so when encountering an endworm. Thalamus. Thalamus is the final form of the ballast flora. It is a static, dangerous creature who grows weapons on the submarine it sank and uses it to lure and attack other submarines that is going to attack and infect as well. At first, it uses the flesh gun to wrap tendrils on the submarine and bring it closer to the Thalamus. Then it uses one of its weapons, which is either a spear gun that it lodges spears inside the submarine, or a spike gun that injects terminal cells into the submarine. These hunt down and explode on unsuspecting crew members, so it's a really bad time when the Thalamus is attacking you. The only way to kill a Thalamus is to kill its brain, that is located somewhere central in the submarine that is trying to devour you. So, good luck. Wrecked encoded messages. This refers to encrypted messages you might find in logbooks inside submarine wrecks on salvage missions. From what I gather, you have to actually enable the salvage mission so that you will be directed to a certain wreck where such logbooks might be found. Some of these contain messages that display randomly on level transitions, while others are logbooks found on wrecks. These might also make references to other games, like some messages are linked to SCP containment breach and so forth. I did not find anything else to go on this entry, so let's continue. Legacy Submarine. We already talked about the Legacy edition of Barotrauma, so I'm not going to dwell on this much, but there's a mod that introduces blocky, bulky, square-shaped submarines from the Legacy edition back into Barotrauma. Don't know why you'd want to do that, but I can say the same thing about using the turning all characters into big titty waifu girls mod, so that's up to you. Hallucination caves. This refers to the bioluminescent caves found in the Great Sea of Europa and are less common but can also be found in the hydrothermal wastes. The corals emit light, giving you the ability to see everything inside the tunnel. However, like their name implies, they create hallucinations, and well, in a sea full of monsters, the last thing I would want to be doing is hallucinating. But hey, that's just me. Okay, we have cleared level 5 and we are continuing to descend into ever deeper, ever darker waters of level 6. golden hammerheads are experiments. I tried looking into this but found only nothing. Only once Google AI Assistant state that these creatures are not part of an experiment. The wiki also doesn't have any useful information about this, and neither is Reddit, so all I can tell you is that the golden hammerheads are a very rare variant of the regular hammerhead, only tougher with more resistances to damage. Usually they spawn in duos with 3 regular hammerheads in tow, which can pose a serious threat to your submarine, as this is a supposed wolf tactics like behavior the golden hammerheads like to employ. All mutations of the Husk. I already covered this when I talked about the Husk infection, at least canonically, and if you're using mods like Improved Husk, then imagine every creature in the game now having its own Husk form, which I'm not going to go over now, but just think about it. A husked Moloch. Isn't it fun? Enjoy. Mantis. This is one of the most rare creatures to find in the oceans of Europa. Typically you won't find them in the open ocean, but rather in caves. The creature itself is about the size of a horse, but moves very rapidly when it spots its prey has entered his domain. Most of the time, it will remain camouflaged and will ignore distractions like sonar that attracts other wildlife. Once provoked, it will move rapidly towards the target, injecting it with paralyzing venom that will keep his target helpless shortly afterwards. Your best bet is to shoot at it from as far as possible until he dies from it. Encrypted logbooks. We already talked about the encrypted messages section. The thing about these logbooks is that you can find them during salvage missions. What is referred here though is a series of logbooks containing encrypted data. Finding and returning the correct logbook, i.e. the one encrypted, usually completes the mission. I can't really find anything on this other than it saying it received some kind of data. There are other logbooks that can be found of non-related NPCs, but then again, it's unrelated, so I don't really know. Alright, so now we have passed the deep waters of level 6, and we are entering into the abyss of level 7. Tormsdale Incident. We mentioned back in level 2 how the factions, the 2 big ones, basically formed almost simultaneously, and that the Separatists were originally founded as a non-violent group. Well, apparently, it is speculated that the moment they turned from non-violent into violent is the Tormsdale Incident. Apparently, this is only from rumors and whistles that I found reference to only once. The leadership of the Separatists met at Tormsdale in order to declare open elections, possibly for the leadership of the group, or even they might have contacted the coalition to come and agree upon a general elections in order to put a stop to the faction system and instead adopt a democratically elected government that will rule over all Europeans. Again, I might be mistaken here because I couldn't find the place where I read it the first time, but apparently either by mistake or coalition sabotage who tried to take out the Jovian separatist leaders, the reactor of the Tormsdale Linea station either exploded or leaked radiation. It is not known if the coalition actually was behind this or even if they succeeded, but among the community this is regarded as the main point from which the separatists went underground, resulting to terrorist attacks and high-value assassinations. Today, it seems like the separatists are a lot less conspiring in the dark corners and a lot more like actually challenging the coalition in pitched fights over settlements and cities. Alien tech and structures. Throughout the ocean of Europa, you will encounter alien ruins, filled with automatic alien robot defenders and alien artifacts humanity has never seen before. The origin of said aliens is debatable as nobody is really quite sure. Some say the aliens were a native species that evolved on Europa, while some say they were brought here through the eye, which is something we'll discuss in a later entry. Likewise, their purpose on Europa remains a mystery. Why did they come here? If they actually came here, what was their culture, their language? No one really knows. If you plan to explore these ruins, come well prepared, well stocked with medical items and ammo. This is a high risk, high reward area. You can try to be bold and live with alien artifacts and rare minerals, but just know that not everyone will make it back. Jacob Surba. Jacob Surba is the head organizer of the Church of the Husk. He calls himself a musical DJ and an organizer of many of their rave parties, which were a cover-up for their operations. I can't find it again where I read about it the first time, but from what I hear, one time one of these parties got totally out of control, resulting in a mass Husk infection event where dozens if not hundreds got infected and turned into husks. He is wanted by the authorities because of that, and he will probably get caught one way or another unless some submarine captain decides to intervene on his behalf. Hidden lore. There is no real reference directly to hidden lore wherever I searched it, but I did come across several lore elements that might count as hidden lore. These details contain the beginning of human civilization of Europa, or the beginning of human colonization, of Europa, the existence of the aliens who are now known as the Ancient Ones, the old man's journals which appear to be scattered around Europa and give great survival tips how to handle certain situations that I couldn't really find any explanation of, and more. Apparently you need to be really lucky to find a certain NPC like a colony dweller to get more information about the hidden lore of Barotrauma, or go ancient artifact hunting in alien ruins, submarines and abandoned outposts where you might find more information lost to time. Again, keep in mind, if there's anything in Barotrauma that is abandoned, chances are what made it become abandoned is probably still around or inside. What happened to Earth? Finally, a node I wanted to talk about a long while. As Trinity once said to Neo, it is the question that drives us. Ask any Barotrauma player this question and you will always get a different answer. Just like other games of its type, like aforementioned Iron Lung and such, with a bleak background that's kept vague on purpose, nobody knows for sure, but everyone has their own theories. Some propose that the Earth just nuked itself, Fallout style, which, to be frank, is always a possibility, although even if Earth nuked itself and Europa was colonized, then we can assume other planets have been colonized as well, so maybe nobody is really interested in Europa, like we said in the Europa is a space slum, maybe? Others suggest that the aliens from Europa might have originally meant to arrive on Earth and upon correcting their mistake are now in the process of invading our home planet. I also heard some saying that the Earth just blinked out of existence, or even that the Earth found out about the Husk infection and decided to quarantine Europa, which I guess also makes sense. Now I bet you want me to tell you what my theory is, right? Well, it goes something like this. We know that the radiation from Jupiter has been pummeling Europa, and we know canonically it's getting worse all the time, basically due to the eye, which we will discuss later in a little bit. Now, being also a Kerbal Space Program player, my bet is that the Jovian radiation got so bad on the surface that no spacecraft can land there without significant risks. Higher radiation levels can fry electronics, so drones could be out of the question, and that also means it requires more shielding from the deadly radiation just to get close to Europa. More shielding means the ship is way heavier with far less delta V, which is basically how much thrust I'm getting for my fuel because of the extra weight. Now, Earth needs to design new ships and deploy an entirely new spaceship fleet specifically built to handle Europa, and in the meantime, Earth is basically just left scratching its head how to get there, and all this time, Europa just sits there absolutely unreachable. Hell, it might even be that Earth concluded that the radiation levels fried everyone under Europa's surface, and the situation doesn't warrant coming to take a look anymore. But no matter why, it changes nothing. Earth has abandoned us. We're stuck here, and we only have each other to count on. Crawlers are what remains of the aliens. This is another case of ask any Barotrauma player about it and you'll get different answers. This is a speculation people did because of the new crawlers seem to have two arms with what can be described as sort of fingers, raising the possibility that crawlers can manipulate objects much like humans do with their own arms. Another case for this speculation is that only humans and crawlers, can get infected with the Husk parasite, hinting that it requires a sort of higher innate intellectual capability for the parasite to work. Also, a lot of people seem to find crawlers among alien ruins, which also hinted for this possibility. Now, there are plenty of theories why, and here are two of my own. One is that I think that if they are related to the aliens, or the aliens who built the ruins, then they probably are a kind of engineered species, much like what humans try to achieve in the Fallout universe by making super mutants, which are highly resistant, bigger, stronger, able to live longer, and thrive in radiated areas. And by making these stronger yet dumber variants of themselves, they were either outbred by them or outright killed by their own creations, just as the super mutants like to hunt humans in the Fallout universe. The second theory of mine is that just like periods of human history, the aliens too underwent a slow degradation of knowledge, just like humanity in the Dark Ages, where it took us a millennia to reach and surpass the same level of knowledge as that of the Roman Empire, so too these crawlers, who might have been cut off from their homeworld, went through a knowledge degradation period where each generation knew less than the one before, ultimately leading them to a life of cannibal pack hunters, living off whatever creatures they can reasonably hunt for food, and resort to cannibalism when one of their own dies. Alright, we have finally reached the last level where all the endgame content is revealed, so naturally, spoiler alert. Now, I felt that this level of the iceberg is a little bit incomplete, so before we start, I want to add two entries to this iceberg, starting with the Prophet of Sierpinsk. The Prophet of Sierpinsk is an old scientist trying to study the eye. He can be found at the beacon station, presumably not far from the eye itself. I have never encountered him before because I haven't reached the end game of Barotrauma yet, but I do saw videos of people who actually reached him. From footage I've seen, he tries to explain that the eye is a giant portal which leads to the final boss and end of the game. He explained the eye as being a giant Calibu manifold, scooping all of Jupiter's radiation and making it rain upon Europa. This explains both the presence of higher than normal levels of radiation on Europa, and since radiation is cumulative, it might possibly explain why it's getting worse over time. There, I don't know how to pronounce this. Usitruku? Rek? So this story might be or might not actually be true. It might be a fairy tale for all we know. It tells of a tale of a cargo sub being sunk and destroyed by some god-awful creature. Trapped in some kind of air pocket, a lone survivor has scavenged a meager existence. After several days of being trapped underwater in a sunken submarine, the survivor is rescued. Upon discovery, the survivor is asked how she, I at least think it's a she, survived all this time, and she said that the Honk mother gave her company throughout the ordeal. And instead of being taken at face value as a deranged rant by a person who was probably suffering from some kind of hypoxia for a few days, the rescuers made an entire belief system out of it, and thus became the story of the Honk Mother, the deity to which all clowns and entertainers on Europa pray for. Artie Doolittle. An anomaly of a man. It is possible that the devs wanted an in-game event where you visit stations and you might run into an NPC who wants to join your crew for free. However, that NPC always has the same name, and that name is Artie Doolittle. The fact that many players encounter the same NPC at random places throughout the world has led people to believe that Artie is a kind of a forgotten benevolent clone, one of many scattered throughout human settlements. He can't particularly remember his past. All he knows is that he wants to serve on a submarine and help anyone who can. He is willing to do it for free. Artie has quickly become a sweetheart of the Barotrauma community, one that people will fight to keep alive during missions. He is an absolute legend, a patron saint of the ocean, and his presence is always welcome on any and all submarines of the European Sea. The Eye. To put it lightly, the Eye is a portal which leads to the planet of Jupiter and the halls where the final boss resides in. We talked about how the prophet talks about the Eye as scooping up all the radiation emitted from Jupiter and making it rain all across Europa. The Eye is basically a giant sphere which teleports the player and their submarine, and it is implied that after the final battle with the death of the final boss, the Eye closes, trapping the players up forever, but ensuring a brighter future for Europa and an end to the radiation rain that has poisoned Europa for centuries. Doomworm, the old final boss, and the final boss. I combine these two because I don't see the point in making them separate. Doomworm was a version of the Endworm but bigger and meaner. He was replaced by an entity known as Jove. Jove is an alien god which serves as the final boss of the game. He is a massive entity that is protected by shields that destroy any and all projectiles coming its way. All 3 shields must be destroyed in order to kill Jove, effectively ending the game. Jove can also summon fractal guardians, the more damage it takes. It can fire both anomaly projectiles at the submarine and at certain health milestone emit powerful EMP waves up to 200 meters from him. Apparently, Jove is the god of the ancients, a race of passive intelligent creatures who are implied to have built the alien ruins on Europa. They talk in some instances to the crew, implying that Jove has subjugated them and caused the fall of their civilization. Killing Jove starts a monologue that Jove talks to the player about the bridge collapsing, how the skies are for you now open, and how they won't know about the player's sacrifice, but we, supposedly the ancients, do. Then there's another dialogue, this time on the planet's surface, where the human observatory installation on Europa is speaking, talking about something happening under the title of gravitational collapse, possibly hinting to the collapse of the gravitational anomaly that has been caused by the eye. And once it is gone, so was the anomaly. The game then throws the player back into the starting area as a new game plus, suggesting that Jove is basically a god so powerful it exists in several, if not all, timelines, and that the last Jove that died opened the sky for Europa of that timeline, but now the player is in a different one where Jove still exists, meaning that no matter how many times the player kills Jove, he will never enjoy a radiation-free Europa, being able to escape the underground oceans and live on Europa's surface. Right, so I think that does it for this Iceberg. It was a real eye-opening ride for even for me, as someone who already sunk about 100 hours into playing Barotrauma. Researching it all was a challenge, and writing the text for all of this video took me several days alone. If you know anything more about the lore of Barotrauma and would love to share, or if you found a mistake of mine and would like to correct me, or maybe you have suggestions for future Iceberg videos, please leave a comment below, as I'm all ears on this. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will see you in future videos.